All right, cool. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. We've got a lot of official members and a lot of awesome unofficial people here today. So I'll go ahead and get started with approving the June, September, and October meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve those meeting minutes?
I guess I'll make a motion.
All right, awesome. Clyde, was that a second? All right, we have a silent second with a thumbs up from Commissioner Church. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. No one opposes. All right, great. Love passing those. Next up, we're going to hear a update on the Forest Resilience Planning Guide. Laura Hickey is here to do that, so I'll go ahead and pass that. And thank you so much, Laura, for joining us.
I hate to request this, but could we wait? Could I go next? There's a vacuum in the background of the airport that I'm at right now. I don't know if that's
no. We do not hear it, but that's fine if we just want to kind of switch up our meeting topics. Is everyone okay with that? All right, cool. So the main thing that I want to talk about today is discussing kind of the overarching plan for 2025. So in 2024, we've done a lot with the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, and that is about to wrap up. We also did some like forest tracker stuff earlier on. Amanda or Aaron, were either of you hoping to update on that today, or are you just tuning in?
I'm just tuning in, but if you need an update, I can provide that.
Same thing.
Maybe a quick update, just if people are curious. And if there's anything that you think looking forward to 2025 might be an opportunity, that we can weave that into the next section as well.
Sure. So we have a meeting this afternoon with the Forest Tracker core team, which is myself, Nick Kotlinski, and Brett Walk, and Stephanie Mueller, and Rebecca Daniels. And we are doing a soft launch this month. So that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. And that soft launch will be to key partners to get feedback. And so partners that we outreach to will have pretty much the month of January is the idea to provide feedback on the Forest Tracker and its utility and functionality. And then in February, we will plan to do a full launch of the Forest Tracker in its current state, version 1.
Awesome. Cool. Okay.
That's our current plan. And again, we have a meeting this afternoon to touch base on that, but that's our goal.
Cool. Okay, so we as a committee can maybe kind of be on the lookout around February, March for the full launch and see if, I know at some point we had talked about maybe some sort of like formal statement about it, or helping get the word out, or weaving it just through all of the leveraging resources things that we do. Awesome. And Brett is just joining.
Yeah, thanks for your support.
Cool. All right, and then the other, getting into the main meat of it. So yeah, that was kind of an overview of what we worked on in 2024, and now looking into 2025, I kind of see it as a bit of a fresh start where we're kind of wrapping up some big stuff that happened in 2024, and now we're looking ahead. So just to get the ball rolling, I'm not like married to anything in this, but I had laid out a spreadsheet, which I'm going to share now. Yes, you may observe my screen, except this isn't the one I want. Hold on, I'm not familiar with Google Meet very well. I guess maybe I just have to do this. Do you see the spreadsheet now, or do you see yourselves?
We see the spreadsheet, but not column A.
Okay, that is because I don't have column A on my own screen. Okay, well, if I do it this way, I won't be able to see any of you. So I guess if you have something to say, then just unmute and let me know. Sorry about that. So these are our meeting dates for the main part of 2025 is along column A. And I went through, Courtney has a parking lot document where we've basically tracked all of the things that we've said, yeah, we should talk about that at some point in the future. And I just kind of started plugging things in that I thought might be of interest to talk about in 2025. And then I kind of looked at like which objectives those things might align with, possible speakers. And the way I laid this out was a little bit inspired by the way that the legislative committee runs, which is that they'll have a few presentations and then they'll kind of deliberate, like, where does this fit into our work? Is there anything that we want to move forward with regarding this? So that's where I started with this. It's just ideas. I just wanted to get something on the page and see what everybody thinks. So yeah, I guess, does anyone have any initial thoughts on this? The things I want to talk about are, do these things in this spreadsheet address the priorities that we want to address as a committee? Is there anything missing? Should we just start from scratch? Let's hear what your thoughts are.
Katie, even though I'm not an official committee member, I just have a quick question, which is whether items on this list might address some of the statutory duties as well, in relation to the possible connection between this committee and then the legislative committee being able to prioritize like together and in conjunction.
Yeah, and so in that column C, the where I wrote Forest Health Council objective this aligns with, that is from the survey that Allison, I think you and Courtney maybe tag teamed a presentation on it in our last meeting. So that was like strategy development for growing capacity, landscape scale priorities, workforce development, supporting forest collaboratives. Those are the priorities you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So I took a stab at writing which ones I think each one addresses. And so that's one of the questions that I have is, do we feel like these are adequately addressing those? Do we feel like we want to focus on one or a couple of those priorities more heavily? In which case we can kind of shift things around.
Thanks for the clarification.
Well, hearing silence, let me shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
One thing that I've run into and seen from a number of private landowners is the match and how the match for grants is handled. I think there's some opportunities to accelerate forest fire mitigation with some sort of partial gap financing or some way of funding that. Now there's both federal and state grants, and what is it? The Forest Foundation grants, and so I think there's a gap there that we could somehow fill and leverage to accelerate mitigation.
Yeah, and so are you suggesting that as a topic that we add into the lineup?
It could be if the group feels that's something that they want to back. It is an issue, but I don't know to what extent and what kind of acceleration could be gained from addressing this in some way.
Are matches statutory required? I mean, is that a requirement of the state grants? Because I know in BLM, when we do financial assistance agreements, we don't require match. So
Mm,
Yeah, it is on state and some federals, where the match is either, cash match or an in-kind, labor hours. I know in some of the grants I've seen around here, they'll have, labor allowed if you turn in signed labor sheets, at the rate of $31 an hour per volunteer. Now, some places have their own equipment, and that's can be part of the match. But just, it's good to hear BLM doesn't have a match. We ought to send some people your way.
yeah, and just so everybody knows, our notice of funding opportunity for Forest and Woodlands is out right now. I think it closes February 3rd or something. I know that they asked for match in the state grants, but is it required? I mean, within the program it's required, but is it required by law to match? That's what my question is to someone that might know.
Hey, this is Diana Selby with the Colorado State Forest Service. Sorry, I'm having internet issues, so I can't have my camera on, but it depends on the program. But yes, some of them do have legislative requirements. We usually try to be as flexible as we can when we have the opportunity, but if they require a match legislatively, then there's no getting around that. So we just have to work within those confines.
Maybe that's a discussion for the other committee then, to maybe either lower them or make them, depending on where they're at, not required. I don't know. Just a thought, but yeah, it's a good subject.
One thing that I'm looking at is I had proposed a session around leveraging state funding programs to make things easier for applicants. And my main thought in that one was coming out of the Colorado Forest Collaborative Summit. A lot of our attendees were talking about how if the people leading the grants can just kind of communicate a little bit better and maybe align some of the application processes and reporting processes, then that could be easier. But I wonder if we could roll this in as well and do something where we have some of the people who are managing the grants as well as some of the people who are applying for the grants, and we can kind of facilitate a conversation through this committee on how to make things easier. And then as the committee, then we can recommend some things out of that. Does that seem like something that would make sense?
I think it does. And I mean, I'm on the firmware review committee this year, and I've been through probably 10 or 12 applications, and you can tell like the people that are struggling to get matched, they don't ask for a lot of money because they can't match, so yeah. If there is opportunity there, if the match was reduced or was zero, you might get more players in the game. So
I agree. I hear about a lot. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I agree. I hear this is an issue a lot for people. I don't know. I think we could make a recommendation to the legislative committee to like change legislation, or I think you had some good questions, John, of is it something that even needs legislative change, or just a grant program administrator making different decisions in agencies. But I guess I caution a little bit on how much we tackle this to solve this as a committee. Some of the other things we've talked about as a committee, we had right in the last year or year and a half or wherever, we had presentations from Utah, from California on their large centralized sort of databases, and also how they pair grant programs with tracking and reporting and all that kind of stuff in a centralized way. So I'd like to continue that. I think as a committee, we can make a bigger impact. We want to change how things are operating at the state amongst the different agencies. That's a bigger thing to chew on, but maybe we start with some of these, like, how do we require a match? But it's to what you were saying earlier, how do we also streamline reporting and the application process so that more programs have similar applications and like in some of those kind of things. So lining those up, see what we can tee up and address one at a time with maybe an end goal of addressing all of or a lot of them.
Yeah, a little bit bigger picture. Yeah, what do others think about that? I think we could, yeah, set up the meetings to kind of flow in a way where we're working your picture. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was just going to say that I understand the dilemma, but sometimes match is a pretty good indicator of collaborative readiness. If you have that match and you're there, you're more likely to be successful in receiving the funds. That's not always the case, but sometimes you kind of have to start small and build and get practiced into it to have that match to be able to apply for more and more funds. And so that's not always the case, I want to say, but sometimes it is a one of those things that helps make sure that the people who are getting funding are really in those later stages of collaborative readiness.
Yeah.
There's definitely something to be said. You got to have skin in the game, right? So, I mean, there's that. But I think going back to Brett's thing, so you're talking, Brett, are you talking more like an WRI approach to where things are centralized to roll through everything? I mean, because that program, as far as I know, I'm not super familiar, but basically all veg treatments go through that program for the state. So all the money, all the players, I mean, everything. So, I mean, it's all centralized. I don't know if the state can pull something like that off. I mean, that's a pretty large undertaking. But
yeah, we had those presentations. Everyone on the committee was like, ooh, that's pretty slick. And there were some good issues that brought up that are different from Utah and Colorado legislatively, governmental, sort of how our systems are set up. But yeah, I didn't know if that just died. If we say it's hard and we're not going to do it, then it's not going to happen. If something we want to work towards, there's probably a way to work towards it. So, but I also want to make sure that we keep attention of people on the committee. I have a tendency to like Katie said, that's a good big picture idea, Brett. But then you lose people if you're always shooting for that and don't make small wins. So if we can make some small wins on individual programs and something like match or standardizing applications better, I think that's a good way to start.
Allison, I see you've got a hand raised, and I think this question that Brett is bringing is maybe that is a purpose of today, is figure out, like, do we want to kind of set a comprehensive plan to work toward one big thing for most of 2025, or do we want to just focus on more of the small wins where we can have a quick impact, which both have pros and cons. So, but I'll let Allison go ahead.
I was just going to say this conversation is happening in, outside of the Forest Health space as well. At the continuing, oh gosh, I already forgot that, but there was the event in Chaffee County hosted by Envision Chaffee and the Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative just this last year. And we had a whole round table discussion about this idea of whether it was match or just grant consolidation in general, as we have too many grants or maybe not enough, too many spaces where grants are held and people cannot find the grants or maybe the places where they can, figure out where to apply for grants. Match was part of that conversation as well. And so I know folks working on the Colorado Outdoor Strategy are also thinking about this. So there's some crosswalk between other efforts.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be interesting also. I know right now State Forest Service is having meetings in each of their 4 areas about how to particularly better engage with people they haven't served as well in the past, and sort of in whatever sense of underserved from their perspective. And those are the exact people that don't have the match but need the programs. And so whatever you all find from that, I think could be informative to our conversation. Because what you said, Aaron, is I think we've all seen that, yes, if you have more match, then that indicates some level of readiness, but that doesn't mean that other people aren't ready or shouldn't have the opportunity to be ready. So I'm glad you all are pursuing that and would like to know more.
Mhm.
I'll just respond to that, Brad, and yeah, that's we have 2 more scheduled, and then internally, this State Forest Service will kind of have some feedback and look at some of those results in the early part of next year. So we will be circling back with partners and sort of saying, here's what we got, here's our plans for moving forward. Not all of it's related to grants and cost share, but that could be a component for sure, and we'll definitely bring that to this group and see how that can fit in. And then to Katie's question, I think we can definitely maybe have some kind of like introduction, or I don't know. I think there's just a lot of nuances, a variety of different grant programs, all with different requirements. I mean, and in our agency alone, we strive to be consistent with how we manage them and how we, what we ask for and the application process. And it's super hard because each program has got very different requirements. And so just maybe having a broader understanding of that by this group to sort of see what those look like and how, what are the potential solutions that you could come up with based on here's all the stuff that's out there and why these things are not consistent right now and why their timing isn't always, going to be the same each year. And so some of those things might be helpful for this group to have a better understanding of before, trying to dive in and figure out things.
Mhm. Any reactions to that?
Well, anything we can do to streamline the application process and the reporting process, but still give the agencies what they need for various reasons, I think would be good. So I think that's an area to streamline. Maybe the grant matches, a third or fourth in the list. Yeah, how big of a job is it to align different grant programs? I'm assuming they're created years out of sync and funded on a continuous basis. Is it realistic to simplify the reporting and the application process?
That's the $1 million question, I think. And that
Yeah.
sort of goes back to Brett's point, right? About like how big of an undertaking would something like the WRI program be? Because they've done a pretty good job of cracking that. Sorry, Diana, did I interrupt you?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that might be some the application its direction on that specific program. So it depends on the program, but I think again, if you all had sort of here's a list of a bunch of different grant programs and what the constraints are, and then you could sort of figure out from there what would it take? Would it be a legislative change to the program, or would it be like as simple as administratively changing things? I would say, I don't know about Allison, but I would say for the most part, we as state agencies try to simplify as much as we can. We don't want it to be more complicated than it needs to be. So, but I think that would be a good start, is to sort of get that broader picture and then be able to sort of figure out from there what next steps or what recommendations this committee would want to make.
Mm-hmm. That seems very reasonable to me, and then we can kind of figure out what I mean, we can't set a timeline now if we don't know what the problems are. And I imagine some of it, like what you were saying with furworm, some of that might be legislative, and then maybe we need to either pull in the legislative committee or something like that. But yeah, maybe our focus is just generally speaking, like how can we better align and simplify grant programs to make it easier for everyone in the big picture, and then figure out the path forward from there. And maybe it's baby steps. It will be baby steps for sure. But we can start working on those baby steps and see how it goes.
I think that could be good. I think it could go two ways as well. There's a lot of learning for us on this committee about the nuances of the grant programs, but also I'd like to see us use the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, which is based on the Colorado Stages of Readiness that Aaron referenced earlier. So here are the kinds of resources that people in Colorado need in order to do effective forest management. The grant programs aligning with the needs that have been developed there. So not just here's all the restrictions on the grant programs, but also here's the needs of Colorado. Way.
So like, what do we need? What's stopping us? Both of those things. And we are here and we need to bring them together.
Yeah, I do. I think this is good. I think, we focus on money a lot and grants, and rightfully so. It's important for doing the work we do, but I would also hope that leveraging resources in this committee is beyond money. And there's lots of other resources of knowledge and expertise and all this other stuff that might actually be easier for us to get some wins and move the needle rather than trying to navigate all of the nuanced policy and grants agreements. So I don't know exactly what those are yet, but maybe we decide either we focus on learning as much as we can about grants and agreements and trying to make some progress there this year, or say that's beyond our control and someone else's problem and focus on something else too, or a little mix. But I don't know. I just want to make sure and throw that out there too. There's other resources besides funding that can help drive funding.
Just want to chime in here as the vacuum is gone. And Brett, you mentioned the resilience planning guide, and Action 11 is all about securing resources and actually gives a framework for categorizing resource needs. So there's funding, workforce, technical assistance, data and information, facilitating partnerships, tools and equipment. Those are kind of those categories of what's the kind of resource needed to help people think through those. So just something to refer to maybe get the group kind of on the same page of different resource categories that you could focus on for legislative programs or just agency programs or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the spreadsheet, which was sent out in an email, and I shared my screen earlier, but it's okay if you don't have it pulled up. I'll kind of walk through it. But in the spreadsheet that I had sent out, I think I was focusing more on some of the individual small things that I think we could move the needle on. Do we think it's realistic to have maybe at each meeting, and I'm sorry if I keep getting overly narrowly focused, but I'm really trying to envision what next year will look like for us. Do we think that maybe we could have split each meeting into halves, where the first half is, here's a small thing that we are trying to move the needle on, and then we're going to revisit our big picture goals. And so we're maybe doing a little bit of both, where the big picture thing is aligning these funding opportunities and making them better and more accessible. And then we also have these small things that are maybe focusing on those other resources like workforce development at the community college level or forestry programs in conservation districts, things that maybe we can have smaller recommendations on. So maybe we get a little bit of both and it's exciting for the big picture people and the littler picture people. But that also might be way too much and then we'll just get nothing done. So I'm not sure. What do we think?
I think small so we can have a goal that we can get something done. If I'm gonna put effort into this, I want to have an impact on some way.
So you think only focus on the individual?
You should always know why you're doing something. Like it should relate to a bigger why, but I don't know that we need to have half the meeting on it. It could be just a 2-minute introduction. Remember, we're having this conversation because we want to align grant programs across the whole state. Now let's talk about this one issue on this one grant.
Mhm.
But I appreciate Katie as chair trying to hear everyone on the committee and incorporate their feedback into the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure we all feel invested and can feel passionate about this goal that we're working toward and feel like we're making progress in a way that everyone's excited about.
Well, with bite-sized issues, it's good to show progress and move the needle on several different issues. We'll get to the other issues later on, maybe 26, 27. I think we just, like a forest grows, we have to be patient too.
Very wise. So thinking about some of the individual programs that we're going to want to hear from and think through, maybe just start shouting them out and then we can start getting those set up. I mean, CoSWAP is always an easy one to get on this call because we got Allison and Courtney and Roberta are always here, friends of the committee.
Yeah, we're available.
And Furworm is another one. That's a easy starting point. Shout them out.
Are you looking for grant programs here?
Or like what would our individual meetings like start to look like? Like where should we start? Conservation Corps. I'm going to share my document again. You're always seeing the screen that I don't want you to see. Okay.
I see a spreadsheet.
Okay, great. This is sort of what I'm trying to fill in my head is I just want to make sure that we're, for my planning purposes, that I've got a place to look forward to. Well, maybe I'll just do some brainstorming then. All right, Laura's got in the chat vision, align grant programs across the state for ease and equity of access, strategy, piecewise discussion at monthly leveraging resource committee meetings. Oh, wow. I love this, Laura. Such a facilitator mind. Do you want to talk through that at all? Is the vacuum gone?
It is, yeah, I can talk through it. I just reflecting kind of what I'm hearing based on this conversation and Katie trying to break it down to objectives of maybe what the committee can work on. And then that next step kind of would be like next meeting to ID programs that this group has influence on, and then like further next steps for each of those objectives based on that conversation. Really just, this is what I'm hearing, is that vision to align grant programs. Your strategy is kind of piecewise discussions at these monthly meetings. And then I guess also considering what that means for quarterly meetings as well. Like if you can bring a recommendation to each quarterly meeting. But this is just a draft of something for you to work off of for conversation.
No, that's super helpful. Yeah, I think this is sort of where my brain is working and trying to translate that to moving this group forward. So that's really helpful. I mean, does that sound like a good, at least kind of, I like the vision at least for 2025. If that's our big picture, and then figuring out from meeting to meeting what that's going to look like to move the needle forward each time.
I guess my question is this: so kind of how Brett said too, WRI trying to get to that point is probably too big of a chunk, but aren't these little chunks, those all would potentially get to that point? So
Right.
do we want to get, is that the path that we want to get to? I mean, I think if that is the path that we come up with, then we need to have conversations with someone that's going to run the program. So Colorado State Forest Service, or maybe a different entity if they're not interested. I don't know, but I feel like if that's the end goal, maybe that's 2 years out or 3 years or something, but to get these steps to get there, right? So, I mean, maybe is that the direction we want to go or try to get to? I don't know. I feel like aligning grant programs and all these things will help that get to that point, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. So like, I guess what I was picturing is, kind of the setup that I was laying out earlier is like, what is the need? And we know that the need is, or, we have an idea that the need is easier match, more aligned reporting, clarity of application processes, right? There's like a need coming from the ground of people saying like, this is why I can't access this funding or why it's not working for me. And then we talk to the funders and they say, well, here's the laundry list of reasons why we can't make it easier for people at this time. And then we're coming in the middle and saying like, well, maybe here's a first step, and then that will work us toward in the future getting to something more like WRI. But like, there's these baby steps that we can do right now that could be a year one thing.
I know
For sure. Go ahead.
I was going to say problem solving kind of takes a course based upon, if you push in one place, we'll go into soft spots that are easy with a low hanging fruit. Otherwise, we end up prioritizing them and may pick a difficult task that we can't move the needle on, or it takes extremely long, versus a number of smaller tasks that are sub-related and cross-related. And push on some of these topics and see what gives first and what we can move the needle on. It's kind of a natural prioritization by ease of access. That's just one way of doing it.
I agree, but I mean, I think while we're doing those things, we should have these larger, like 3 to 5 year discussions. Like if we want to get to if that's the point we want to get to is the WR, we need to have discussions with the people at who's going to run it, who's going to do this. We can do all that little stuff, right, to get to that point. But if they don't want to be involved or they don't want that, the state doesn't want that or whoever, then I don't know. It's almost like, goals versus objectives, right? I mean, we're trying to get all these little things done to get to something. What is that something?
Yeah.
Allison, did you have your hand raised physically first and then Brett can go?
Yeah, just really quick. I also used to work in Utah for 7 years at the start of my career, so I'm very familiar with UWRI. I'm also familiar with Oregon's Watershed Enhancement Board, OWEB. I'm going to put that link in the chat. But if we're going to explore, if you want to explore, this sort of broadening of our programs, we should definitely bring in the Colorado Water Conservation Board if you haven't already in discussions on this, because these two programs are not just for forest health, as we all know, right? They're riparian habitat. They're sort of that water in, whole watershed approach, which is fabulous. And so, yeah, I would suggest bringing someone in from CWCB as we start these conversations, if we do.
And now Brett, you go ahead.
I'm actually over here on my screen. You're pointing the other way from me.
Oh, you're here.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I wouldn't get hung up too much, John, on who's going to do it right now. I think that can come much later down the road. And a lot of times they set up a whole different organization of 3 or 4 or however many people to run it. So I wouldn't let that be a barrier. But I guess a question so Laura, thank you for writing this out just so we have something to respond to. But Kitty, and everyone at the end of the year, if I'm reading Laura's description of our work plan, at the end of the year, what we put in the annual report for the Forest Health Council is we identified programs this group has influence and connections to. I hope we can do better than that. And I know Laura just wrote this really quick, but that's what I'm like. In 8 months, what are we going to write in the final report that said we did something that mattered? I don't know exactly what that is, but I think that's where focusing on some smaller tangible things.
Again, I agree. I agree. But again, if our goal is to get to a point and then we spend time trying to fix all these individual grant programs within the state and whoever, the end goal would be to have one centralized grant that would go to everybody and everybody gets on the same playing field. Basically all veg management, you would apply to one grant and you would all get, so if we fix all the individual ones, are we wasting our time doing that? Or should we be pushing for one program? You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying is, are we wasting our time doing the individual ones versus just going for, I wouldn't say the whole enchilada, but starting that path, right? So that's kind of why I'm interested to know if that's the end goal type of thing. So that's the thing.
No, I think we're agreeing of I want a big picture goal, and we can link that in all of our conversations. I think I'm just saying I don't know that we have to have everything figured out, and if the goal of this committee is to better leverage resources, even if we align a handful of programs to better be able to leverage resources, and we don't reach the whole enchilada of a WRI or California Oregon system, that still is moving the needle and having an impact and meeting the intent of this committee, right? So I think we can start down that road and see where we get. And then if we have success, I would imagine people would be more interested in continuing it. And if we don't, change direction.
Yeah, so
Something-
if we can, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say something else that I've noticed here as we've been talking is that some of the issues are easier to sell, communicate, explain, and be received by the public and by legislatures. Some of them are obvious. Just going back to what was just being said, how can we make progress on something that's important if we pick something that's very difficult, but something that's intuitive and everybody supports, we can make easier progress on, and maybe faster progress. It just depends on the acceptability of the listener and the system we have to work with to accomplish it. It's a little bit of marketing. How do we pick the winner? Or winners, plural.
And if we can pick out things that we agree, like from, I keep using WRI because it's the easiest acronym to remember, but from these other states' programs examples, like if we can all agree that there are certain benefits that we like out of that and keep those as our overarching things that we're working toward, then if we do end up moving toward a WRI type thing, then we've got those in place. And if we decide that just these baby steps are better and WRI isn't for Colorado, that's fine too. And so we're still moving toward the common goal. It's just how far that goal ends up being. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and
Go
I'm
ahead.
curious if I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my devices. I got a new phone and so that's why I was late. I'm having trouble, had to download all the apps again. So I'm curious if this is feedback from local groups, and do we have information, data, survey? Because if we're looking to make this big of a system change, should we get more stakeholder involvement and discussion if we're heading that direction? Because I think that if we start heading that direction, we get a lot of pushback. That's a lot of capital, social capital and energy. And I'm wondering how we explore the idea with others and get stakeholder involvement to see if this is something everyone's interested in, and with it being the goal, trying to make these easier, accessible, move quicker, and bring this to the full council and to maybe some of the stakeholders, because I can see already in the back of my mind thinking, oh, we'd have to go get that group to willing to change this, and that is always not to be a naysayer. I'm just saying it's easier to pull them in at the beginning of the conversations and getting their feedback and seeing what they think than saying, hey, we're making these changes. And I'm just curious. I'm trying to thinking out loud a little bit because I'm trying to understand. And again, I'm sorry I was late. That's what I get for deciding to upgrade after 5 years. So I'm just yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm curious about I mean, this is kind of a bottom up request, but how do we get those who are administering this in these funding streams and the different organizations to hear that feedback? And then I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. How I hate to start going down this road and then we reach a spot where maybe we move the needle, but not where we needed it to go. And then what do we do next? Does that make sense? How can we be strategic to get the goals that we want to do? if we're looking to do
Yeah.
this as a big thing, because that's a big shift and from what's currently in place to switch to another system. And we are going to have a new administration in 2 years, and there's lots of things coming down the pike that I think we also have to think strategically, what does that all look like, right? And how does that function? So just kind of want to throw that out there to some things that were kind of racing through my mind. I hope you don't mind me thinking out loud.
No, that's great. I think that's a super valid concern. And I know, I think some of us have heard through our networks, just maybe anecdotally, what some of the challenges are. So that's what we're basing it off of right now. And then as well as at the Forest Collaborative Summit in September, we did kind of a structured feedback session where we heard some of this. But I think that would be woven in because we kind of talked about the structure of like identifying the need and identifying what's stopping us from getting to that need, and identifying the need would be pulling in the stakeholders and saying like, hey, so I think that bottom up piece definitely is important to not forget about. I think we haven't talked about it much in this meeting, but I definitely envision it will be there, and that'll be some of the conversations that we have as like speakers and stuff.
And I think I'll echo Katie. I think we've heard that from this committee of Katie's reports through the Colorado Forest Collaborative Network. Laura, I don't know if you can remember this as well, but we did focus groups for the Forest Resilience Planning Guide and heard from a lot of people around the state. And this issue came up in those spaces too. So absolutely want to co-develop ideas with people is way better than telling about it later. But I think that's why it's come up in conversation amongst all the committee members, is because we have heard it. And as a state board, we're supposed to be responsive to those needs.
Mm-hmm. So seeing that we've got 5 minutes left, I think this has been helpful for clarity as far as we're going to have this overarching vision. We're going to take small steps within that vision. I'll do a little bit more brainstorming in the next month about what that actually looks like. But I think for now, we'll kind of focus on problem identification and build out our next steps from there. And I'll also compile some key points from some of our past meetings where we heard from like WRI and stuff, because I think those were quite a while ago at this point, but I think that'll be helpful to bring all those things back, do a refresher on what we know, figure out where we need to go next. But it sounds like people are in agreement that we want to have this overarching vision and also make sure that we have successes along the way. Laura, do you want to give a super quick update on the Forest Resilience Planning Guide?
Sure. And Brett, good thinking on kind of looking back at what we heard from those focus groups from the planning guide. Katie, I can resend you that themes report that we heard to see if that can help with any kind of context around what specifically people are looking for when it comes to grant program accessibility. The Forest Resilience Planning Guide, the final content revisions have all been made. It's all in formatting right now, and I developed a communications plan to help spread the word about it being completed. I know that the vision for this group was to take the guide as a recommendation for the Forest Health Council kind of, approval, sponsorship, support at one of the quarterly meetings. And we would be looking to you all to kind of do some of the outreach as well, any additional contacts or direct emails to help spread the word about the guide once it's wrapped up. So we can provide content for that, but I think the ask right now is just start thinking about who you want to send it to. right now. We intend to reach back out to folks who participated and helped kind of spread the word about newsletter or the focus groups like FACO, Colorado Commissioners Incorporated, CFCN, the Health Council itself, and Rocky Mountain Restoration Institute as well. So I think it's really, that's the update. Yeah, is it's getting close, and we want this committee's help to kind of bring it to the council for support and build a user group for it. Any questions?
I'm super excited, Laura. It feels like a long time coming.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for all your patience to get it together. It's really in the last stretch here. So looking forward to getting it out in the world.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll keep everybody updated for sure. All right. Any other closing thoughts? And if not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. Thanks everyone so much. I hope you have a good rest of your week and happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2025.
Thank you. It's a good year.